Welcome back, YouTubers. This is Richard of GK's Apprentice with you again, and today we're bringing you another Duel video. My apologies for not having a deck profile up recently, but I only just tweaked the deck for this build, and that will be up shortly. For now, please enjoy this very exciting Dueling Network duel of my Gravekeepers versus the vicious Blackwings. Alright, so as per Dueling Network standard, we're going to play paper, rock, scissors, and I am going to win the right to choose, and I will choose to go first. We're going to draw into our opening hand, and I have a pretty decent opener. So I take a look and I decide to go ahead and set the Mystical Space Typhoon, Rite of Spirit, and Torrential Tribute, as well as setting my Descendant in face down defense position before ending my turn. On my opponent's first turn, he activates a Mystical Space Typhoon, destroying my Mystical Space Typhoon, followed by setting 2 back row, 3 back row, and ending his turn. On my turn, I draw into a Necro Valley and decide to flip summon my Descendant and activate my Necro Valley, to which he responds by Fiendish Chaining my Descendant. I go ahead and set my Magical Dimension and end my turn. On my opponent's turn, he plays a Black Whirlwind spell card, which is going to allow him to search his deck every time he normal summons a Blackwing monster. However, I'm going to chain my Magical Dimension, targeting my Descendant, and targeting his Blackwing monster for destruction after special summoning my Commandant. I had thought that he would still get his search, but it turns out the monster has to remain face up on the field. And I go ahead and draw into a Fiendish Chain, setting it, and then I attempt to attack with my Commandant, to which my opponent will activate a Dimensional Prison. However, I chain Rite of Spirit, targeting my Descendant, and I will attack with my Descendant also. My opponent activates a Mirror Force, and my Descendant is sent to the grave. My opponent normal summons into a Blackwing Shara of the Black Flame and gets his Black Whirlwind search off, pulling out a Boar of the Spear. Using Boar's effect, he's going to special summon from his hand, at which point I will activate a Torrential Tribute. On my turn, I draw into a pretty dead Imperial Tombs, and end my turn after setting it. My opponent normal summons into a second Shura, getting a search off again for Boar of the Spear, and this time he's going to hit me pretty hard for 1800 as well as 1700 direct. He uses Blackwing Kata to raise Boar's attack by 1400. and I take an additional 1400 direct damage. On my turn, I draw into a second Imperial Tombs, have no choice but to set it and just end my turn. And my opponent targets my recently set Imperial Tombs for destruction with Mystical Space Typhoon before hitting me for 1800. And he says good game, but I go ahead and activate my Fiendish Chain, holding on to 1300 of my life points. And on his main phase 2, he's going to special summon into a Gaga Cowboy in defense position, and he's going to knock off 800 more of my life points, leaving me at 500 to an 8,000 monster right now. I draw into an Assailant, which is just what I need to get the ball rolling, and I go ahead and use the Assailant's effect to kill the Gaga and start dealing some damage, finally. On my opponent's turn, he sets one back row and ends. I draw into a Spy, set, and attack with my Assailant. He uses a Mirror Force. I go ahead and resolve the Mirror Force before ending my turn. He sets one back row on his turn and ends. I draw into a Heretic. I try to get my Spy's effect off. He says okay. And I go ahead and special summon to the field the Gravekeeper's Recruiter. Additionally, I normal summon into the Heretic and attack. 1800 direct, 1700 direct, and 1700 direct. On my opponent's turn, he normal summons into a Blizzard, and I ask him if he's going to be activating Black Whirlwind. I remind him that Negra Valley negates Blizzard, and ask him if he's activating Black Whirlwind. He says yes, and I chain my Imperial Tombs. He ends his turn with that, and I draw into my second Heretic to seal the deal, definitely. Bam. To which, again, he says, good game, and I take game number 1. So we're going to side for game number 2, and we're going to add both of our Kaiser Colosseums, as well as our Thunder King Ryo and our Fossil Dyna. We're going to side out, of course, one of our Steelas, one Rite of Spirit. Also one of our Wonder Wands. Also the Book of Moon. So we're going to swap out those 4 cards, and we're going to go into game number 2, which our opponent, of course, has the right to go first this time, so he's going to do that. And so we're gonna draw into our opening hands for game number 2. I look pretty strong. I have a couple really great traps, and it's only getting better. I draw into a Gravekeeper's Recruiter after my opponent set 3 back row during his turn and ended. Go ahead and set my Magical Dimension, as well as my Torrential Tribute and my Bottomless Trap Hole. And then I am going to set my Fossil Dyna. and end my turn. On my opponent's turn, he sets one back row and ends. On my next turn, I normal summon into my Gravekeeper's Recruiter, and then I attack, to which I'm going to get Dimensional Imprisoned, which I'll chain my magical dimension, targeting my Recruiter. And that's going to allow me to just put my Commandant on board, as well as get my Recruiter's effect off, where I will search for a second Commandant, adding that to my hand. During my main phase 2, I use my Commandant's effect to add a Necro Valley from my deck to my hand, and I activate it after setting my Black Horn of Heaven, and then I end my turn. On my opponent's turn, he looks at my graveyard, then decides to end his turn. I draw into a Solemn Warning and set it. Entering my battle phase, I attack with my Commandant, which my opponent uses a Dimensional Prison, and banish my Commandant. On my opponent's turn, he activates two Black Whirlwinds, excuse me, and normal summons. He gets both of his Black Whirlwind effects off, as well as a monster effect. He adds the Blizzard and a Gale to his hand. I do not think he got a monster effect off, actually. And then he's going to special summon Gale. And then he's going to synchro into a level 6, which is the Blackwing Armed Wing. And I take a look at what my options are. I should just go ahead and negate this. I don't know why I didn't negate it. I instead decide to use my Bottomless Trap Hole, and you'll see me just almost activate Solemn Warning, but I didn't for some reason. Decided to use Bottomless Trap Hole, and my opponent at that point chains, and he chains with a Delta Crow anti-reverse, and that's going to destroy all my cards. But since this is on the response to a successful summon, go ahead and activate a Torrential Tribute. And all of my spells are destroyed. All of my set spells are. I draw into a Gravekeeper's Ascendant, which I try to attack with. It is killed with a Mirror Force. At that point, I go ahead and scoop it up for a game 2 loss. On siding for game number 3, I go ahead and decide to add in the Curse Seal, the Forbidden Spell. And I decide to side out one of my magical dimensions. I almost went with the Torrential Tribute, but I did not. And swap that card and head into game number 3. I'm going to opt to go first. Drawing into my game 3 opener, I draw into a Kaiser Coliseum, a magical dimension, and a Compulse. And I go ahead and set the latter two. I set my Gravekeeper Spy, I activate my Necro Valley as well as my Kaiser Coliseum, and I end my turn. My opponent's first turn of the game, he activates a Mystical Space Typhoon, destroying my Kaiser Coliseum. Then he normal summons into Shura the Black Flame. I say that the summon is alright. He sets one back row, Then he activates a Pot of Duality, which is going to let him search into a Mystical Space Typhoon, another Shura, and an Allure of Darkness. He's going to take the Mystical Space Typhoon and put the other two back in his deck. Activating the Mystical Space Typhoon, he destroys my Necro Valley. And sets one more back row and ends his turn. On my turn, I draw into my Curse Seal. Can't really do much with it this turn, but I go ahead and set it in case I get the spell card in my hand. And I go ahead and flip summon my Spy, which my Spy's effect is going to go off. So, of course, I special summon a Gravekeeper's Recruiter. And then I'm going to activate my Magical Dimension, targeting my Gravekeeper's Recruiter. And that's going to be successful. Now, a special summon, I choose to try to destroy his monster, and he says he's thinking, but what I don't think he realizes is that there's nothing he can do. The card's already resolving, so his monster is going to have to be destroyed. And of course he realizes that, I think, and he just destroys the monster. And I will activate my Recruiter's effect, getting his search off, with which I add the Gravekeeper's Commandant to my hand. Now, I use Commandant's effect to get a Necro Valley in my hand. And I do not activate this Necro Valley because I want to be able to use Curse Seal, the Forbidden Spell. Instead, I just use my Descendant's effect to destroy one of his back row. It turns out to be a Lance, which he chains. So I actually chain my Compulsory Evacuation device. I don't know why I did this actually, but I did it. And I chain targeting Descendant, adding him to my hand, at which point I normal summon him because I have not normal summoned this turn. He says that I had, but I quickly explain that I hadn't. I tell him that I special summon the Recruiter with Spy's effect, and then I special summon the Descendant with my Magical Dimension. So he takes the 1500 damage, and on that I go to my main phase 2, decide to activate my Necro Valley, and I end my turn. On my opponent's turn, he plays a Pot of Duality, drawing into a Mirror Force, a Karat, and an Icarus attack. And I do not like the Icarus attack, but he decides to take the Mirror Force, which I think is silly, since obviously I'm going to know where he's putting that Mirror Force. I'm not going to attack into it, and I draw into a Gravekeeper's Assailant, which I go ahead and normal summon. And I use my Descendant's effect and I target that Mirror Force, and I go ahead and attack for 2000 direct. On my opponent's turn, he normal summons into a Black Wing and just ends his turn. On my turn, he gets my 2 cards. He gets the Descendant, and he gets away with destroying my Curse Seal, but I set my Imperial Tombs, and end my turn. On my opponent's turn, he normal summons into a Bora, and I of course have to allow it. He attacks me for 1700 direct damage before he ends his turn. On my turn, I draw into a Rite of Spirit, setting it and ending my turn. On my opponent's turn, he sets one back row and he attacks, at which point I normal summon into, or I activate Rite of Spirit rather, and target my recruiter. Into attack mode. My opponent opts not to attack after all and ends his turn. I draw into a second Imperial Tombs and I go ahead and attack. He chains and I use my first Imperial Tombs to negate the Icarus attack, leaving my Gravekeeper's recruiter on the field, and I attack directly for 1700 direct damage. And I end my turn. On my opponent's turn, he sets one back row and ends. On my turn, I draw the game winner and I attack for game after I negate his Dimensional Prison with my second Imperial Tombs. And he says good game, and that's going to be a win. And that will do it for this duel. That's going to do it for this week's Duel video, you guys. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and leave any comments on your thoughts. Until next time, this is Richard of GK's Apprentice signing off.